Hi guys, welcome to this. This is going to be my first review of a payware aircraft. I think I'm like most people in having a small collection of payware aircraft and then rummaging around trying to find freeware aircraft. And there's a definite difference between the quality of payware and the quality of freeware. And I think that generally comes down to the development time and the development costs. But of course there's also an issue in terms of price. Now this is the de Havilland DHC-1 Chipmunk payware aircraft from Just Flight, and I've just bought it. Literally, it came out last week, and I'm just going to talk through what I think about it and do kind of a review or first impressions, or however you'd like to refer to it. It's £10 at the moment from the website. I think it's going to go up to 15 at the end of the month. It's kind of like an introductory offer, but at £10 it's relatively inexpensive. It's relatively straightforward. There isn't a massive amount of complexity to it, and obviously that's reflected in the price point. You know, for something like a PMDG product, or a top line product, you're paying £40–50 for an aircraft, but it's taken months of development by teams of dozens of people to get to that final product. This is very much at the other end of the scale. This is very much small team project, looking at a much more simple aircraft. However, that's not to detract from the product itself, really, because certainly when you look outside visually, there's some lovely touches and appearances to this. I mean, the first thing to say is it is a very attractive aircraft, and a lot of people in real life do very much enjoy this aircraft. They do speak very highly of it, both in terms of its looks, its handling, and just the sheer joy they get from flying it. So quickly looking at the external side of things, I mean, there's some lovely features. You can see the oleos for the extension of the undercarriage here. They're nice and shiny and glossy with the chrome finish, yet the brake pads and the brake pipes are all present and correct. You can also see there's some really small details, like down on the underside of the wing, you've got the tie-down points. You've obviously got the riveting around the wing fairings and the actual fuselage itself, and then you've got some finer details that aren't always immediately apparent, like the yellow tire lineup mark, the creep mark as it's called, with the yellow bolt, the yellow paint, and the little red mark there, and things like that are, in real life, that shows that the tire's not gradually creeping around the rim, which is something you have to check in real life. And then you've got the faded areas of the panels where the catches are for the engine cowlings that obviously student pilots for decades will have undone those, undone them and redone them as they're checking the oil levels and the liquids and the various conditions within the cowling. And then you've got things like the pitot heater over here, but there's a lovely touch on the leading edge where it's all the faded paint, and commonly these aircraft, because of their size, they don't get huge tugs to drag them around hangars. They inevitably get pushed around by engineers, technicians, students, and for light aircraft the recommended places to push include things like the leading edge, so you've kind of got this faded effect, as if students have been pushing these things around, and it's a lovely effect. Really do like it. Moving into the cockpit, it's got the same sort of worn effect around it. The crash pad at the front here it's got wear patches in it. The combing, I think it would be best described as, that comes down here. You can see where the paint's all faded, and things like the flap to protect the starter have got wear and tear on them, and just generally it looks like a lovely worn cockpit. I mean, this is the front cockpit where the student would generally sit. So here you have the rear cockpit where the instructor would generally sit, and again it's a lovely sort of worn, detailed place to be. You can see it's got slightly fewer controls, certainly down on the left-hand wall of the cockpit. And I was reading quite a fun article about Chipmunks and how certainly people who fly them solo often end up, they get in, they strap themselves in the front seat, they get ready to go, and then when they flick the switches nothing happens, and it's quite often because of switches that have been left in the back cockpit. So for example, here you've got two little magneto switches to turn on, and you know, if you don't turn those on, then apparently that can cause problems. And then most of the levers here, the throttle, the mixture, and the fuel cock, they're all like linked through the brake and the flap lever. They're all actually linked through control rods, so they're not so much of a problem. But it's certainly the magnetos in the rear cockpit are something to consider. And then apparently what happens, and it did make me chuckle, you can see how far back the canopy comes. So what happens is our solo Chipmunk pilot goes, right, I've had a nightmare, I've strapped myself into the front cockpit, I've started to fire the thing up and I haven't been able to fire the thing up, and all the switches are in the wrong places, and then they reach behind them to pull the canopy forwards, and it's all the way at the back and they can't reach it, so then they have to turn it off, they have to unstrap, they have to climb out, they have to slide the canopy halfway forwards, and then once it's halfway forwards they then jump back in, and then they fire it all up and off they go again. But enough of all that, let's get this thing started, let's get it off the ground and see how it flies. So, it's a very, very basic aircraft. I mean, even compared to some of the more modern sort of, or more current light general aviation single-engined aircraft, this is a really basic bit of kit. And it is back to sort of stick and rudder flying, and we'll have a look at the flying qualities once we're airborne. But in the meantime, let's put the fuel cock on. Let's put the magnetos, the mixture fully rich. Check the magnetos are on, which they are. We're not going to use any lighting because it hasn't got the sort of rotating beacon. It's just literally got taxi lights, navigation lights, and interior cabin lights. So with regards to that, there's not really much that you would do. So at the moment, what we've got, if I go outside again, you can see we've got a ground cart connected for power. I don't know myself whether they start off the batteries normally or what the deal is, but certainly for this we've got ground power. Now if I just zoom in down here, ooh, a little bit too much there, you can see there's a switch here, a three position switch, and this relates to the electrical sources. At the moment it's switched up to ground, which will give us enough power off the ground unit to actually start the aircraft. And in effect it powers the aircraft while the engine's not running. So just running through it quickly, we've got the fuel cock is on, the mixture's fully rich. I keep stumbling over that at the moment. Crack the throttle open about ½ an inch or so. There's no need to worry about any lights at the moment, and we should be good to go. So the starter flap goes down, pull the starter switch, and sure enough it fires up. At this point we can put that switch all the way down for flight. Let's have a quick look outside. Yep, that's all gone, so we are good to go. Put the cover back to protect the starter because we don't want that being inadvertently operated while we're airborne. Now fortunately in the simulator we've got miraculously long hands and we can close the canopy even from behind, and lovely little touches like the engine noise just quietened down a little bit there. In the cockpit itself there's still quite a lot that can be clicked on and operated, so we can turn our lights on, we can mess around with the carb heat here if we needed it. We're not going to use it. Turn the radios on, very basic radio set it should be said. So it's got a 2D pop-up window for the radio set here, and the GPS, but pretty much that's us good to go. So without further ado, we need to just have a quick talk about takeoff in this thing. It's a very basic aircraft. It's pretty much one that, as a tail dragger, it does fly itself off. There's not really much to worry about that. I use foot pedals with it. I disconnect the auto coordination and use separate foot pedals because I just think with such a good handling aircraft it does it justice to be able to do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to take off and have a look at its handling in the air. So as full power comes in, just watching which way the tail wants to move. It wants to move slightly to the left, so a bit of right rudder to try and keep it straight. We're flying from Popham here, which is in fact no, sorry, this is Land's End. Lovely little airfield. Flown into it myself. It can be quite confusing with the taxiways because it's all grass, but some areas are used for the runways, and you may well have seen it as we took off there. There's like black and white checkerboards marking the thresholds and whatnot. So okay, so we've taken off. I'm just climbing out now at about 80 knots. It is a lovely aircraft to handle. After takeoff checks, there are none really unless you use the flaps, and it's just a case of checking the T's and P's. Temperatures and pressures are all good. and we've got good oil pressure. So beyond that, we're not really worried. The generator warning light is out. So if I turn the generator off, because it's got magnetos, it won't suddenly stop the engine running, but it does mean that we run off battery power, and the battery power tends to drain much more quickly. So, airborne. Really now, having had a look at the outside and had a look at the inside, it's really just a case of how this thing flies. And it flies very well. The real aircraft is a delight to fly. As I say, I've flown it for real, albeit a long time ago. And most of my flying of recent times has been light aircraft, so I've kind of got a benchmark against which to look at this aircraft, and it really is a lovely aircraft to fly. Looking at the Cornish coast now as we come round, lovely day for flying here. Now it is aerobatic. It was used by the military as a trainer. One of the main requirements they have of any aircraft they use as a trainer is the fact that it's aerobatic. However, it's not like an extra 300. You don't throw this thing around the sky with gay abandon. It will struggle with certain aerobatics, and it will also bite you if you try some that are too complex for it. However, the manual gives 4 manoeuvres in terms of not how to fly them, but speeds that you would normally fly them at. So we'll just come around to the left, clear of this cloud, and we'll go through a couple of them. Basically, the 4 that they recommend in the manual to have a look at, or the 4 with the recommended entry speeds, are the roll, the loop, the barrel roll, and the half roll off the top. And the first one, the easiest one, is the roll, for which they say entry speed is 120 knots, so we've got 120 knots, full power, pitch your nose up about 10-15 degrees, and all the way over with the control column. And it's not exactly the most spirited roll rate. You know, certainly Spitfires and other aircraft in FSX will beat it quite handsomely. One of the things I don't know if you noticed there, it's worth having a listen. I'll do it without chattering, and hopefully you'll hear it, but it's an inline straight 4 engine, but it isn't designed for long-term inverted flight. So what I'll do is I'll do the same thing again, and you'll hear the engine note change as we do it. I don't know if you heard that, where it slowed down and then started back up again. Another interesting thing to note is the wind noise. We're doing 120 knots, got quite a lot of wind noise, so I'm going to slow us right down, and we can have a listen to the wind noise, see if that changes. I don't know if it does or doesn't. I haven't tried this before. I think that's a shame. It seems to be the same sort of volume. It doesn't seem to quieten down. I think in real life, or certainly I know in real life, one of the characteristics you look for in terms of an aircraft approaching the stall is the noise, certainly the wind noise in light aircraft, because it's very apparent. But unfortunately, this doesn't seem to replicate that sort of quietness, the eerie quietness that you get when you're in a slow-flying light aircraft. Just turn ourselves back towards land. So we've got a decent altitude here, 3,000 feet, and we'll just try another couple of manoeuvres and see how we get on with it. Okay, so rolling wings level. One of the next ones they were looking at was a barrel roll, so 120 knots entry speed. So we're at 130 knots, and over we go. It's not a particularly great one, but there we go. One barrel roll, 130 knots. You can then do a loop, so we're at 140, speed checked, over we go. Beautiful, look at that. As we come over the top, take the power off, otherwise we're going to just pull ourselves straight into the ground. That's noticeable. There's no buffet. If you pull towards the wing being able to stall, it has simulated that. When you fly through your own wake, aircraft wake, you do get a lumpy, turbulent bit when you fly through if you do it right. So obviously Flight Simulator thinks we did that right. Unfortunately, it's not matched by the fact that when you pull to the stall, you get a buffet. So half roll off the top, entering with 130 knots airspeed, So there we go, and pulling back smoothly, looking for the top, and as you see the roll rate's not massively sprightly. It can be helped by a little bit of rudder, a little bit too much rudder there because it decided it wanted to try and go into a spin. So the minimum sort of altitude you expect for the spin is about 3,000 feet. Whilst we climb up a bit, just a couple of other visual things to look at. Obviously we've discussed the frame being quite worn and looking tired, but if you look over here on the right, you can see the perspex of the canopy against the sunlight. You've got all the scratches or the marks from the shaping of the canopy, which is really nice to see. You know, it just adds that additional element to show that this is you know, a good simulation of an aircraft that's demonstrating real life use. For £10 or £15 when it does get the price increase, you can't really argue with that as a sort of level of detail. Now I'm going to have a look and see if this thing will demonstrate a decent spin. So what I'm going to do is take the power off, and we're going to slow down. When we get to the stall point, we're going to pull the stick fully back and kick in full left rudder. We'll go left. Having read their textbook, they say that a bit of out of turn aileron can help start the spin. There's the stall. Full left rudder. Oh, it's gone over the other way. And there we go, it's reversed. That's one turn, coming back round. See if it does it again. Ooh, over the top. It's going to just turn us quickly again. You can see the rate of descent is going to be crazy when we come over the top. It's not quite gone into a proper stall. However, centralise the rudder, stick fully forwards, and we're out of the spin. You can see now we're down to 1,500 feet, so we lost 2,000 feet doing that. It didn't take long to go down, but then, you know, that's what you expect if you've departed from controlled flight. So yeah, didn't manage a particularly great spin there. I don't know how the aircraft is in terms of the realism of its spinning. It doesn't seem to be particularly good from spins I've experienced in other aircraft. However, that may just be the pilot rather than the aircraft itself. I suspect it probably is. But there we go. Now we've got St Just, or Land's End, over to the left there. You can just see the lights on the left of the canopy. Price point for this aircraft, £10–15. Actually, I think that's really quite good value for money. It's a really nicely detailed aircraft. If you're fairly new to FSX, it's the kind of aircraft I suggest you'd probably want to look at, mainly because it's such a nice aircraft to fly. It hasn't really got that many vices. It hasn't really got that many areas where it's going to bite you. You know, as I say, it's not on the level of sort of complexity of, say, something like PMDG, but I'm just looking at the airfield now. I think we're going to be roughly lined up. We're a little bit high. I'm not sure what the wind is. I've got active weather next generation, or whatever it's called, and I've only just started using that, so I don't know what the weather is and the wind. So we'll just have to make it up as we go along. But I think I'm aligned with the runway. I've flown out of Land's End in real life in a light aircraft, and it was, you know, it's quite a nice airfield. It's difficult to navigate around because there's, as I say, the markings differentiating the taxiways from the runways are a little bit of a pain. You know, once you try to taxi back to the main sort of airport section, if you like, it can be a bit difficult to keep track of where you are and where the runways are, because basically it's just a massive field with some checkerboard markings, and a lot of the time you see it here with the centerline markings and whatnot. In real life, I don't even remember it being there. I remember seeing there's a few patches which have slightly shorter grass, and then there's a few patches which have longer grass, and that pretty much was the markings, apart from a few checkerboards. You can see this is coming in nicely about 60 knots. I think with a tailwheel aircraft, in reality they're much harder to land than I've found this one. There's a very high risk of ground looping in real life, but I haven't seemed to be able to provoke it that greatly on the ground. I don't know, I think maybe that's a good thing, because this is clearly aimed at a fairly basic level. So there's our checkerboards. It's a fairly hard and crunchy landing, just getting the stall warning just before we hit the ground. But there we go. Hope you guys like that. As I say, it's my first review, so if you've got any comments or remarks, then please feel free to let me know. And likewise, if you want to see more, then please feel free to like or subscribe the video. But hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Thank you very much.